It's time for me to catch up on some content. So we're gonna put my makeup on and we're gonna go through my July wrap up. Yeah, that's how late we are. Let's let's fix this. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello if you're new. I am very behind. The Booker Prize is ruining my life a little bit, just a little bit, just a smidgen. It's ruining my life. So I haven't been filming, combined with the fact that I don't know when to film anymore because I have this whole space here that I film in, but it's right outside our bedroom and I work nights now. So I have somebody sleeping in my, I've just perfected the ability to film videos at night, set up. Unfortunately, I didn't think about the fact that, like, the person on the other side of the door wakes up if I sneeze anywhere in the house. We're working on things. Be patient with me. We're gonna play some catch up. I have the day off today. I have a couple days off, so this is my middle off day. This is the day I have off in the middle, and I'm awake. It is 11 something in the morning. It's quite early for me. There's daylight, we're filming, we're gonna go, that's enough rambling. Let's talk about everything I read in July. Like usual, we will go through my Storygraph stats, and then we will go through the books on Bookly and just zip through them. This is really gonna be an exercise in how much I can recall, because it's been over a month now. There were a lot of books read in August because of Booker. We got a lot to do. So I'm gonna get the makeup out. I also have new makeup. This is from Subtle Stacks, and it's just basically all in here, and I really am enjoying having a little compact thing, and I only have to add a couple other little doohickeys to have a face of makeup. Anyway, so in July, I read 19 books, which was 5,540 pages. I forgot one must be hydrated to record. And my moods were the same as always: emotional, dark, reflective, challenging. I seem to be getting a few more funny books, though, if you look down the list. Like, funny is moving up. Perhaps I'm not as depressed as usual. The pace was medium. One day someone will explain to me what that really means. I get what a fast book is, and I get what a slow book is, and I get that a medium book would be in between those two things. But like when I'm reading a book, I don't think, you know what, this is a really medium paced book. Maybe that's just me. I read pretty evenly between very short books under 300 and 3 to 5. 3 to 5 is kind of my sweet spot. I haven't been reading as many big books this year, but I also haven't been reading as much fantasy, so that usually cuts down like how big my books are. And then I did have a little bit of nonfiction in there. My genres are top 5 literary, historical, which is a little weird to me. I don't know why there's so much historical this year. LGBTQI plus, IA plus, and romance fantasy. Those are kind of my top 5 reads from July, which I'm kind of annoyed by. I would really, I really need to get that fantasy list up higher. It's really irritating me that I'm not reading as much fantasy as I want to, but And then overall, I don't know how great July was. I think it's one of my lowest rated months, but overall it's a 3.47, which I know is actually fine, but it's kind of just basically like a mid. It's kind of mid. And then I can't remember if I DNF'd anything. I don't recall. We're going to find out what I did when I pull up my Bookly. So let me start slapping some stuff on this face of mine, and we're going to do some Bookly stats. We're going to be scary here before we get less scary. Can you tell I'm exhausted? Probably. And I was hoping to have more vlogs, but I don't really know what to vlog while I'm just sort of puttering around the house in the middle of the night. We're going to work on it. Till then, I hope you enjoy this little like life update. Get ready with me and let's talk about everything I read in July. What a potpourri of things to do in a video. So we're gonna start right off with Manhunt by Gretchen Feller Martin, and I actually did not like this book. I talked about it a bit in a recent vlog, so I'm not going to go too much into it. You can watch that vlog. I'll try to link it somewhere if I can remember. I just found it to be a little repetitive, and the plot wasn't totally engaging for me, and it was just mostly about, like, eating man parts, and that's fine, like, I'm fine with that, but somehow that got boring. I guess I could see what they were trying to do, but it didn't work for me. Kind of started off a little meh with that one. The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, and I actually really enjoyed this book. It's my first Maggie O'Farrell, so I didn't really know what to expect, other than for it to be like really well written, because I know that she is very well regarded. I have not read Hamnet. I also talked about this in the same reading vlog, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but I really enjoyed it. I thought the story was really well done. It made me very curious to read Hamnet. I would love to know people's thoughts on how this ends. So we start the book off with this foreshadowing that our main character is going to be murdered by her husband, and then you kind of backtrack through this lady's life, and you kind of go back and forth, and you see her in different stages in her life. And I would love to know your thoughts, because I feel like there could be some debate over how the book ends, and I would just like to know what everyone's thinking. That's all. I also read a very cute arc of a book that's now out called Morbidly Yours by Ivy Fairbanks, and this is such a cute book, and given the fact that Hozier just put out a new album, I just feel like it's even more of a must read. It is not like the best written book, but if you like romance and you like kind of like a grumpy sunshine plot, and you like some good sort of morbid jokes and just like a nice romance, if you need like that kind of cozy, predictable read, this was good. If you can just get past a few like kind of grammatical errors that happen throughout. It is self-pub. It is their first book. I was having such a good time with the story itself that I did not care, but I know sometimes people like can't get past that sort of stuff, so I leave that up to your discretion. But I really enjoy this. Basically, you've got our female MC. I don't remember anybody's names, so just go with that. Other than the man's name is Callum. I can't remember her name. But anyway, so the female MC moves from the US to Ireland after her husband died, and she has a lot of guilt around that. And she gets this job working in like animation, and she moves in next door to what she thinks is like a hotel, but it turns out to be a funeral home, and is run by a very attractive and grumpy mortician guy, funeral home director, and undertaker, that's the word. And they spark up a romance, romance ensues. And he's funny and it's sweet, and there's like a friends with benefits thing kind of going on for a bit. And like I said, it was just a good distraction, and I just enjoyed myself. And maybe this is some of the reason why I had like some more lighthearted things on my list this month. The summer read for TBR Lowdown was Chain Gang AllStars, and I also read this a bit with the Plek group as well, so there was quite the buddy read going on simultaneously. And I don't know how to feel about this, and I don't know if I need to revisit this book at a different time, and perhaps I was not in the right headspace for it. Perhaps it was not something that I could do as an audiobook, because I predominantly listened to it because it became a car read for me. But I just didn't get the same impact from this as others have gotten. I know that amongst my friends, there seems to be a bit of a mixed, it seems to be a bit of a mixed bag, but I kind of didn't enjoy this. It felt like I started in the middle of a story, and it felt like there were too many POVs, which is not something I normally say, which is why I feel like perhaps I wasn't in the right spot for this story. So essentially, this is a dystopian kind of fantasy about America and our prison system, and especially the privatization of our prison system. And it's imagining an America, which is not too unheard of, or unthinkable, I mean, where prisoners basically have to battle almost like Hunger Games style for their freedom, and we turn this into a spectator sport, and it talks a lot about one, prison abolition and the prison system here, but also like how we monetize and make into entertainment Black bodies. So there's a lot in this that is stuff that, one, is very important and are things that I'm interested in reading, especially criticism of, but I just couldn't ever connect fully with the story where I felt like I could get the full impact of it. And I don't know if that's the book or if that was me at the time. So I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give possibly another chance at some point, but this may have to be something that I just read physically and I don't listen to, because I think the audiobook was part of why I got so disconnected. I think there were just too many points of view and they weren't as clearly defined in audio as perhaps I needed them to be able to enjoy this one. And then for the Booktube prize, I read Geraldine Brooks's Horse, and I did not enjoy this book. And it's not because it wasn't written well. It's just that like I didn't care at all. Like I don't care about the past storyline. I mean, I guess I cared more about the past storyline than the current storyline, but there was just entirely too much about a horse, which, Alyssa, that's exactly what you would think going into a book about a called horse, that it would be a lot about a horse. But like I didn't read this because I wanted to, so it felt kind of torturous to read this book, and I don't DNF Booktube prize books because I need to be able to judge them. I think I stuck this in like in the middle of my pack because I don't think the book itself is bad. I know lots of people did enjoy it, but like I did not. I did not enjoy myself. Essentially, there's a painting of a horse, and that painting of a horse is like by an artist who is very well regarded in horse portraiture. And I guess horse portraiture was like a whole thing, and it was part of how you bought and sold horses in like the 1800s, because you know you didn't really have photography, and like it, how do you show off the fact that the horse was like, you know, all its qualities and all that. So whatever. So there's a whole history of like horse portraiture and horse racing and like how big horse racing used to be. And there's commentary on slavery in the South and racism and all this stuff wrapped up in this book. And then how it's mirrored in today with this, the current storyline. So there's a lot for people to like, but like I just couldn't get past all the horsiness and I became very bored. It was not set up in a way that would be entertaining for me, so therefore I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy Night Shift by Claire Ladner. This is a story about sort of a millennial, zennial woman who kind of had a repressed upbringing, and she is in a relationship with this man, but she starts to become very obsessed with this woman that she meets at work, and it's an exploration of like self and sexuality and millennial malaise. I coming of age kind of stuff like as a younger adult, and I just enjoyed it. It wasn't like as impactful as maybe like a Lily King, but I did enjoy it. I think it's a good like upper mid read in the sort of genre of like angry broken females that I did enjoy. I also and really loved Keiki. This was, I'm probably still saying this wrong. Keiki. I think this is the perfect story if you really wanted to read, or you tried to read Victory City by Salman Rushdie and you were like, this just isn't for me. But in general, the story sounds really interesting. The myth, the legend sounds interesting to you. I would read this instead. This is like, instead of being literary fiction, this is a fantasy, and this is beautifully done. This is the kind of story where literally anything can happen. A girl can grow out of the ground. There can be like flying machines. There can be war and magical swords. And it's such a wonderful story on its own. And then adding in the layer of myth and history and religion, a look into another culture, it just makes it so much better. It elevates it so much. This is such a good book. It's very sort of scathing of patriarchy and how basically men are terrible, but in a historical, magical fantasy context. Moving on. More sort of millennial stuff. This is Self-Care by Lee Stein. And this book I thought was going to be better than it is. It's basically kind of about somebody making a snafu on the internet and kind of getting canceled, and looking at the difference between who gets canceled and why. You have very rich people, male and female, and you have like a more normal person, female. and you see kind of how differently they get treated. It's kind of funny. Like, I feel like if you grew up in like LA or New York or some major cosmopolitan area, you're going to have like a very interesting connection to the story, especially if you're like kind of the same age as the characters in the book. I kept kind of thinking of like Gabrielle Bernstein, if you know Gabrielle Bernstein in like the sort of spiritual woo-woo space and self-help space. Her like little story of like making this startup, doing these like clubbing things. I don't know. It just kept reminding me of her. I don't know why. I kind of felt like one of these main characters was Gabrielle Bernstein. But anyway, that's just a random brain connection in my little matrix of neurons. But anyway, continuing on to this book, which has been sitting here, and that's The Warden by Daniel M. Ford. And this was a surprise. I got this as an ARC from Tor, and then, of course, as I usually do, I got bogged down and didn't read it before it was published, but it came out this year. And I really enjoyed this. So this is about necromancer. So basically you go to school, you become, whatever you do, you become a necromancer. You get placed somewhere, and this person was expecting to be placed somewhere very like elite and ended up in like a remote outpost and where they didn't trust, like none of the villagers trust the necromancer, and they don't understand why they were put there, and they're very upset by it. But then they start to like, get into the groove with the town and the villagers and start to understand each other and start to help each other. Then, the politics come in and some other stuff happens, and book 2 is coming soon. I'm very excited for that. But what I really liked about this is, one, the necromancy isn't like specifically like raising the dead. It's more about manipulating body. So it's more about healing, which I thought was really nice. It was surprisingly cozy, which I really enjoyed. And it was a surprise. It was a surprise little book that I feel like more people need to read. So this was 100% a yes. Loved this. Take My Hand was another Booktube prize book that surprised me. I thought this was I've had this one book that has been on my shelves forever that for some reason, something about the cover, I think it's this other book that I haven't wanted to read. And then somebody reminded me what this book is actually about. And I remembered that, yes, actually, I did want to read this book. I just keep getting the cover confused with another book. So this is about a woman who works as a nurse. I think she's in like the 60s. I could be wrong. Editing Alyssa will fix it. But she's a young Black woman. Her dad's a doctor, and she becomes a nurse, and she's working at this family clinic in the South, and she's giving like Depo-Provera shots to these two young girls out in like this shack, and she becomes very attached to this family, to the father, to the grandmother, to the young girls, and she becomes very invested in their lives, and eventually like gets them better housing and all these things. But it turns out that what they have been doing to these girls was not, first of all, the family didn't understand what they were signing up for, and the medications that these nurses were administering were experimental and should not have been given to people the way they were being given. So it's a story about how medicine abuses Black bodies, which historically is a very upsetting and distressing historical fact. There's a lot of discussion of the Tuskegee experiments. There's like a very tragic and sad fallout that comes from all of this, and it's beautifully written. It is based on historical fact, but the things that are happening are imagined to tell a narrative to bring attention to what has occurred in the past. So I thought this was brilliant. This was really well done. Loved this. That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming is a major disappointment for me. So this is like a TikTok darling of the cozy romanticy sort of space. And it just felt a little too eh. This is the first of a series of books that are like this, where you have sort of a cozy fantasy setting with a romance, but it has a little bit of stakes involved. And I just didn't feel it. I didn't feel any of it. I didn't feel any of the chemistry. I didn't think any of the smut was terribly good. It just felt very like plug and play plot. I did not enjoy. I don't understand the obsession with this little series on Book Talk and in the community. I think this is getting like a reboot, or it's got like new covers. It may have been picked up by a publisher. I can't recall. I might be wrong, but I'm not seeing it. I don't get it. It just felt very lackluster to me. On the other hand, The Story of the Eye by Georges Bataille is a story that I will never forget. It is absurd and surreal and disgusting. And why was it written? Why? Why? It's a lot. If you've never read this story, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's also a major inspiration for Mayfly by C.J. Lead, which is a book I absolutely love. But I think that there's a lot of character. There's a lot of things to draw you in as a reader that goes around all the, like the disturbing, disgusting things that are happening. This is just disturbing, disgusting things, and that's fine. It's too much. And it's only like 90 pages or something. It's too much. It's too much. I did not like it. Did, but I will never forget it. Daughters of Smoke and Fire by Ava Homa. I talked about this in a TBR Lowdown episode recently, but I really loved this. This is about a Kurdish woman in Iran and her life, her struggles, her brother who's a dissident, and the things that he goes through. He gets a point of view. Her father, who was also sort of a dissident, and what happened to him in the past before she even knew him, and how she comes to kind of understand him perhaps a little bit more. It's a beautifully written story. It's an important story. It's a moving story. It is a sad story, and it's something that I think everybody needs to read. So please go out and get yourself a copy. It was wonderful. Oh, I did have a DNF. There was a short that I did a little while ago. I was saying, why is it that I never like Jane Eyre retellings? Like, I can never get into Jane Eyre retellings. Like, they never really do it for me. And there have been a couple of recommendations for things to try, including a book that is not this book called Mr. Rochester. When I was going to find Mr. Rochester, I found this. And I was like, oh, well, let's try Mr. Rochester. And I made it about a quarter of the way through before there was like some weirdly homophobic statement that I don't know why it needed to be in there. Something about like a man crossing his legs usually makes him look gay, but like this guy, Mr. Rochester just looked manlier. I don't know why it needed to be said, but anyway, I really did try to continue reading it to like see how much more ridiculous it got, but it's so bad. It's so, so bad. Essentially it's like somebody read 50 Shades of Grey, but also really liked Jane Eyre and tried to like smush them together into a book. And it's about as good as you would think it is. Wandering Souls by Cecily Pinn was phenomenal, and I don't know why this wasn't nominated for a Booker. I know that a lot of people have their panties in a twist over Demon Copperhead, but no, this one I'm not really sure why this wasn't nominated. This was a really well done and not experimental, but more, they've played more with the narrative, and storytelling form is not as straightforward. It is, you find out by the end who the narrator is. You've got different points of view that are from very interesting characters. It is a story of a family of immigrants trying to leave Vietnam and come to, I believe they're first supposed to go to America and then they end up going to the UK. But it is a gut-wrenching story. It is so well done. I loved this book. It's very short and worth the read, and I need everyone to read it. It is so good, and it honestly should have been longlisted. Yeah, there's a few things that could have come off this list for Wandering Souls. I read Shy by Max Porter. I really loved this book. It's my first Max Porter. I wonder if all Max Porters are like this, but it has this really like rhythmic writing that plays really well in audiobook. It's got like kind of almost like a spoken word thing. Our main character also kind of raps sort of throughout it, so it works really well. It's about mental health and struggle. You've got this young boy in a boys' home, and he is struggling with his own demons and potentially unaliving himself. And it's really, really good. It is very like immersive, and I loved it. I'm very interested to see whether I will like other Max Porter writings. I know lots of people really love his work, and I'm glad that this was my entry point because I really enjoyed this. Wayward by Amelia Hart was our Patreon book club pick. If you don't know, I have a Patreon. We pick a different book every month and we read it. There's a little discussion board for each book. You can look at all the books we've read before, but this was our pick because we wanted something witchy and magical and just kind of not so serious, but serious because there's a lot of serious things being talked about here. But this is the story of three different women across generations, and basically the wolf that they tame within themselves, the magic that they have within themselves that has been squandered and squashed and tried to be controlled by the men around them. It's a lot of commentary on patriarchy and women's agency, and it deals with a lot of heavy topics, including like domestic violence and some other things. So there are a lot of trigger warnings. If you are someone who is sensitive to those things, you might want to look them up. But I thought this was beautiful and magical. And there's a lot of lush scenery and like animal life, insect life. Like if you're a cottage core girly who's like a darker cottage core girly, like cottage core gothic girly, you're gonna love this. Like a witchy cottage core. There's just a lot of like beetles and bugs. I think the cover says it all, but it's very lush and beautiful. And I loved all three storylines. I loved these women. I was rooting for these women, and I thought this was fantastic. I finally read Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, and when I first finished this, I will say that I don't think I was as enamored with it as others have been, or as I thought I would be based on the way it was recommended to me, like with the vehemence it was recommended to me by people. But with time, as these letters have sunk into my brain, and as time has gone on, and I've read some other things, like in August, that deal with sort of similar concepts of like how to write and how to be an artist and the importance of loneliness and alone time. And now I'm thinking of lyrics from a Hosier song. Anyway, I thought it was really lovely. I thought the letters from the poet were weird simply because I feel like the poet who was writing to Rilke talks a lot about like grappling with religion, and Rilke kind of glosses over that and spends so much more time talking about the importance of being alone with your thoughts and having space to have those thoughts, which then got me thinking about a room of one's own and how difficult these things are for women, especially historically. It's very hard to have your own space. I mean, I think about that even here in this house. I don't have a very big house. It's only like 4 rooms. This room is not a room. This is a very wide hallway that we have turned into my library. But like even I don't have a space to call my own, to like shut a door and have it be my own. And how there are times when that's all you want is to be able to close a door and have your own space. And sometimes that door is like to your own mind so that you can think in whatever, but sometimes physically you just want to like close everybody out, and how important that is to the creative process, to your like mental health, to all kinds of other things. So I guess with time, these little letters have seeped into my subconscious and have been more impactful than I initially thought. So yeah, I'm really glad I read this. I think everybody is right. This is the kind of one of these books that you kind of should read in your life at some point. Like at some point, this should come into your life because there's a lot of valuable lessons in here, especially for a creative. For TBR Lowdown's book club pick, which we do sort of bi-monthly, we read The Magician by, I'm going to say it wrong, so I'm going to insert how to say his name here.
Column Tobin.
I think it's Colm Tobin. So this is the story of Thomas Mann and his life. And if you watched my review of Death in Venice, you will know that I was sort of struggling with how to feel about one, that story, and then to struggle with Mann. And that has actually led to a lot of discussions with friends and other people here in the book space about Thomas Mann and about his life and about his writing and about who he is. And I just thought this book was very like in my zeitgeist at this like at the moment of reading it, and it was like the perfect way for me to have a better, more well-rounded understanding of who Mann was as a writer and as a person. And I really enjoyed this, and I need to read more from the author because I want to. I think it was really well written. It was very engaging, and I did really enjoy this. And then finally, I did read one little graphic novel this month, and it's called Taproot, and it's about a gardener. I'm going to put up a couple. I have this here, but I'm going to put up a couple pictures. I think of some of the artwork. The artwork is stunning. I love the like greens, and the color palette is just so soothing. It's like being underwater. Anyway, it's the story of a gardener who can see ghosts, and there's sort of a deal with the Grim Reaper devil guy, and it's really nice. It's really lovely. They kind of all end up working together to achieve things. It kind of feels like there may be more. I would love a little bit more in like a series kind of way with this. It was lovely. It was a good sort of wrap up to the month to just add something nice in there. So if you're looking for a graphic novel, I would check that one out. That's everything I read in July. I think I have a face on. I just need to put on a little mascara and a little lipstick maybe. I don't know. I look a little less frightening perhaps now. Thank you guys for sticking around through what is apparently going to be a very long video. If you want to join the Patreon, there's a link down below. I've also been revamping a lot of my stuff. So the website's been updated. A lot of stuff has been going on behind the scenes while I've just been up all night. And I'm working on a new thing, which I'm going to announce soon, which hopefully will just kind of be a fun little almost newslettery thing if anybody wants to follow along with that. So look out, there'll be a short video coming just kind of talking about that. So yeah, that is everything. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me. Trying to find another way to say this, but I think